If you strip away the franchise mythology, if you ignore what this series eventually becomes, what you're left with in 1984, simply put, is not an action movie. See, The Terminator holds a rather unique place in cinema history as a movie that on its own is defined by a different genre than the rest of the franchise. Because while the Terminator franchise may elicit thoughts of big action set pieces, time travel, and pure, unadulterated sci fi, the first one, 1984, is a slasher film about nuclear dread. And what makes the Terminator so dark, so unsettling, is not just that a killer robot is hunting a woman, it's that the film is soaked in inevitability. That's where the horror is built on the idea that the future has already collapsed and you're just moving ever closer to it. At a structural level, The Terminator moves exactly like a slasher movie. There's a target, Sarah Connor. There's a methodical killer working through a list. There's escalation through proximity. There's an unstoppable figure that cannot be reasoned with. The phone book murders are textbook slasher mechanics. The wrong Sarah dies first, then another. Each death narrows the circle. But here's the crucial difference. In most slashers, the world still exists outside of the killer. In The Terminator, the world is already lost. Kyle Reese doesn't arrive to prevent horror, he arrives from it. And that shifts the tone from suspense to melancholy. This isn't, can we stop the killer? It's, can we delay extinction? That's a heavier question. Because even the idea of our own fate doesn't come in until the sequel. Listen to Kyle when he talks about the future. He doesn't sound heroic, he sounds tired. The future war flashbacks aren't triumphant resistance sequences. They're skeletal, ash covered landscapes, machines walking over skulls, humans hiding like animals. That imagery matters because it tells us something terrifying. Humanity lost. The slasher element, a single woman hunted through Los Angeles, becomes a microcosm of a species hunted through time. The Terminator isn't just after Sarah. He represents what's coming for all of us. And that's where the true horror lives, not in the gunfire, in the fatalism. In 1984, technology wasn't comforting. It was accelerating at a breakneck pace. The Cold War wasn't background noise, it was the atmosphere that everybody lived in. The idea that machines could miscalculate, that automated systems could trigger catastrophe, that nuclear annihilation could be reduced to data, that fear was real. Skynet isn't an evil sorcerer. It's not a dream demon. It's a defense mechanism, a program, a tool that performs exactly as advertised. And that's what makes it horrifying. The monster in this film isn't irrational, it's efficient. The Terminator embodies the anxiety of the era that we would build something too intelligent, too autonomous, too fast, and too deadly, and it would decide for us. There's no supernatural curse here, just progress without restraint. That is pure science fiction horror. Take the police station massacre, for instance. That's often remembered for its body count, but psychologically, it's about something far different. It's about the failure of institutions. Sarah is finally somewhere safe, surrounded by authority, fluorescently lit normalcy, men with guns and badges who believe they understand the threat and that they can stop it. And then, and then the machine walks through the front door, not running, not shouting, not loud, just advancing. The horror isn't the spectacle, it's in the calm. The film doesn't frame it like an action set piece, it frames it like a breach. Order collapses, systems fail, authority is irrelevant against inevitability. That is existential horror wearing a leather jacket. See, the film lives at night. Neon reflections, steel corridors, empty streets. Even moments that could feel warm, like Sarah and Kyle's connection, happen in abandoned industrial spaces. There's no sunlight comfort. There's no morning after good feeling. And that tonal consistency matters because it reinforces the idea that the world is already halfway there, halfway to apocalypse. The final act in the factory isn't just a location for its own sake, it's symbolic. Sarah defeats the machine inside the machinery of industry. Humanity versus automation in the belly of the system that created it in the first place. But even when she wins, it doesn't feel victorious. It is just a temporary win. She crushes the body, but Skynet still exists in the future. What separates the Terminator from traditional slashers is that he is in no way mythic. He is probable. Michael Myers always felt like evil given shape, right? Even this idea of he could be anybody, the volume on the fact that he is pure evil is turned all the way up to 11. The Terminator feels like a prototype. That subtle shift makes the fear more intimate. Because if the monster is supernatural, then you can dismiss it. If the monster is technological, you built it. And the inevitability of his movement, the refusal to stop, the mechanical persistence, it all reinforces that sense of unstoppable forward motion. There's no rage, there's just momentum. And momentum is much harder to fight. When people rewatch The Terminator, they're often surprised with how small it all feels, how contained it all is, how stripped down the movie is. That containment is the point. There's no bombastic score telling you to cheer, no slow motion empowerment shots, no cathartic reversal of power. There is simply survival. Sarah doesn't become a warrior here. She becomes aware, and we pick up with warrior Sarah Connor in the second one. The second one is meant to be the action set piece, the big bombastic moments, the big truck scene, all of it, right? That awareness, though, that basic awareness that the future is out to get her and her son is what's terrifying. Because by the end, when she records those tapes for John, there's no triumph in her voice. There's just simply acceptance that this is what is and this is what is coming. The storm clouds gather in the distance. The future is still growing and still coming, and it's still catastrophic. That's why this film works in a way that later entries just don't. It doesn't offer you any reassurance. It doesn't hold your hand that maybe, just maybe, the future will be brighter. It offers endurance in the face of inevitability. A slasher structure, a machine monster, a geopolitical anxiety that is distilled into chrome and red lights, and a simple, devastating idea. We built the thing that ends us. That human progression and hubris finally created the means for our own destruction. That's horror. That's not spectacle. That's not action. That's horror. In a world that would be deeply concerned and affected by exactly that truth. And it's that same voice and tone and spirit that none of the other ones return back to, which makes this the only entry to tap into that primal fear of the inevitable. The second one takes that fear and then asks, what if we create our own fate? What if we break the cycle and become or do something different than what destiny or fate or the future says is inevitable? And it's those first two movies that, for a lot of people, create a contained story that none of the other ones really are able to touch or tap into. But it all starts with this dark, grimy story about the horrors of technology, inevitability, pride, hubris, and what happens when we are faced with a monster that just keeps coming, that cannot be negotiated with, that cannot be talked down to, that just operates off of mission protocol. What does that mean for how we process who's evil, who's good, who's bad? This isn't a story of good and bad. This is a story of survival.